The rain was coming down hard, hammering against the large glass windows of the daily grind. It was that kind of cold, gray Tuesday afternoon where the sky looked like it was going to fall on the city. Inside, it was warm. The smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee filled the air, mixing with the noise of clinking plates and low murmurs of conversation. It was a safe place, a dry place, away from the storm outside. Maya stood behind the counter wiping a damp cloth across the surface. She was tired. It had been a long week, and rent was due in 2 days. She was working a double shift, trying to pick up as many hours as she could. Her feet hurt and her back was aching, but she kept a smile on her face. It was part of the job. You had to smile, even when you were exhausted, especially when the manager was watching from the office in the back. The diner was busy enough, but not packed. There were a few regulars in their usual spots. An older man sat in the corner booth reading a newspaper and drinking his third cup of black coffee. 2 students were sharing a plate of fries near the window, laughing at something on their phones. The atmosphere was calm, normal, and predictable. That was until the bell above the door chimed. The sound of the bell was sharp, cutting through the noise of the diner. Then came a gust of wind, wet and freezing, that swept across the floor, making the napkins on the counter flutter. Everyone looked up instinctively. Standing in the doorway was a man. He was soaking wet. His clothes were heavy with water hanging off his thin frame. He wore a dirty gray coat that looked like it had seen better years, maybe even decades. His pants were torn at the bottom, revealing boots that were falling apart and covered in mud. His hair was matted to his forehead, dripping water down his face. He stood there for a moment, just looking inside. He looked like he wanted to come in, but he also looked like he was terrified to take another step. He shivered violently, wrapping his arms around himself to try and keep warm. The noise in the diner didn't stop completely, but it got quieter. People lowered their voices. The students by the window stopped laughing and looked at their phones, trying to pretend they didn't see him. The man with the newspaper folded his paper a little tighter and looked away. It was an uncomfortable silence, the kind that happens when people see something sad and don't know how to react. The manager, a tall man named Ron, who cared more about the look of his restaurant than the people in it, walked out of the kitchen. He saw the wet figure by the door and his face turned hard. He walked toward the entrance with fast, angry steps, ready to tell the man to leave. Restaurants like his didn't want people like that inside. It was bad for business, or so he thought. But before Ron could get there, Maya moved. She didn't think about it. She just saw a human being who was freezing. She dropped her cleaning cloth and walked around the counter, heading straight for the door. She reached the man just as Ron was opening his mouth to speak. "Hi there, Maya," said softly. Her voice was gentle, cutting through the tension. The man looked at her. His eyes were sunken and dark, rimmed with red. He looked scared. He pulled his backpack tighter against his chest, as if protecting the only things he owned in the world. He didn't say anything, just nodded slightly. "You're soaking wet," Maya said, keeping her voice low so the other customers wouldn't hear. "It's really coming down out there." "Yes," the man stuttered. His voice was raspy, like he hadn't used it in days. I was just looking for a place to get out of the rain for a minute. I'll go." "I'm sorry." He started to back away, turning his shoulder to the wind outside. It broke Maya's heart. He was apologizing just for existing, just for wanting to get warm. "No, wait," Maya said quickly. She put a hand on his arm. His sleeve was wet and cold, but she didn't pull away. "You don't have to go. Come on in. It's warm in here." The man hesitated. He looked at Ron, who was standing a few feet away, with his arms crossed, looking annoyed. The man clearly saw the look in the manager's eyes and knew he wasn't welcome. "Please," Maya whispered to him. "Just for a few minutes. You can't stand out there in this weather. You'll get sick." She didn't wait for him to answer. She gently guided him further into the room, leading him to a small table near the back, away from the draft of the door. The man walked stiffly, leaving small puddles of water on the floor as he went. He sat down on the chair carefully, as if he was afraid he might break it. He kept his head down, looking at his dirty hands resting on the table. Maya turned to Ron. The manager was frowning, his face turning a shade of red. "Maya," Ron hissed, keeping his voice quiet but sharp. "What are you doing? You can't let him sit there. He smells. He's going to scare off the customers." "Look at him. He's freezing, Ron," Maya said, standing her ground. She wasn't usually one to argue, but she felt strongly about this. "Just give him 10 minutes, please. If he bothers anyone, I'll handle it. But we can't just throw him back out into that storm. He's a person." Ron looked at the man, then at Maya, and then at the few customers who were watching. He didn't want a scene. He gritted his teeth and nodded curtly. 10 minutes. And he better buy something, or he's out. "Fine," Maya said. She turned back to the man. He was sitting with his shoulders hunched over, trying to make himself as small as possible. He looked miserable. Maya walked over to the table and pulled a small notebook out of her apron pocket. She didn't give him a menu. She knew he couldn't afford anything on it. "Can I get you some water? Or maybe some coffee?" Maya asked. "It's on the house." The man looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. "Coffee?" He asked. I don't have any money. I lost my wallet a long time ago. I only have—" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of crumpled bills and some loose change. He counted it out on the table with shaking fingers. "I have $3.50. I don't know what I can get with that. Maybe just some toast?" Maya looked at the money. It was everything he had. He was willing to give it all, just for a piece of toast. She felt a lump form in her throat. She knew exactly what that felt, like to have nothing, and to be hungry. "Put that away," she said kindly. "You keep your money. You might need it later." "No, I have to pay," the man insisted, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't want charity. I just want to be warm." Maya looked around the diner. Her eyes landed on the old piano in the corner. It was a dusty, upright piano that had been there since the diner opened 30 years ago. It was mostly used for decoration, though, sometimes on weekend nights. A tipsy customer would stumble over and bang out a terrible version of Chopsticks. No one really paid attention to it. She looked back at the man. She didn't know why, but she had a feeling. It was a crazy idea, maybe even a stupid one. But something in his sad eyes told her he wasn't just a homeless man on the street. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a past. "Do you play?" Maya asked, nodding her head toward the piano. The man followed her gaze. He stared at the instrument for a long time. His expression changed. The fear and the sadness seemed to lift for just a second, replaced by something else. A longing? A memory. I used to," he whispered. He looked down at his hands. They were dirty. The fingernails were black, and the skin was rough from the cold. "A long time ago, but not anymore. Look at my hands. They are ruined," Maya smiled. "I don't care about your hands. I care about the music." She leaned in closer, speaking quietly so Ron wouldn't hear. "Look, I can't give you free food. My boss would fire me, but I can make a trade. A deal." The man looked at her, confused. "A trade?" "Yes," Maya said. "If you go over there and play a song for us, a real song, I will make you the biggest dinner we have in the kitchen. A burger with fries, a bowl of hot soup, and a slice of apple pie. And unlimited coffee. All of it. But you have to play something good. Do we have a deal?" The man stared at her. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. A hot meal. A real meal. Just for playing a song? He looked at the piano again. It felt like a lifetime ago since he had touched the keys. He was scared. What if he had forgotten? What if his fingers were too stiff? But the hunger in his stomach was sharper than the fear in his heart. He looked at Maya, and for the first time, a tiny hint of a smile touched his lips. It was faint, barely there, but it was real. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, it's a deal." Maya smiled back, a genuine, warm smile. "Good. Go warm up your hands. I'll go put the order in." She turned and walked toward the kitchen, feeling a spark of excitement. Behind her, the sound of a chair scraping against the floor echoed through the diner. The regulars looked up from their meals as the homeless man stood up and, with a slow, heavy walk, made his way toward the old piano in the corner. The room was silent again, waiting to see what would happen next. No one expected that the music they were about to hear would change their lives forever. The man walked slowly toward the old piano. It sat in the corner of the room, gathering a little bit of dust under the bench. Usually, people walked right past it. It was just a piece of furniture, like a potted plant or a coat rack. But today, as the stranger approached, the instrument seemed to hum with a sudden energy. He sat down on the bench. It creaked under his weight. He was still soaking wet, and a puddle of water began to form on the floor beneath him. He didn't seem to notice the cold anymore. His eyes were fixed on the black and white keys. He reached out with trembling hands and gently took off his gloves. His hands were red and rough, covered in dirt and small cuts from living on the street. His fingernails were broken. Behind the counter, Maya watched him closely. She could see he was nervous. His shoulders were hunched up tight against his ears. He looked like a man who was about to jump off a high diving board, scared to take the plunge. A few of the customers stopped eating. The man with the newspaper lowered it a few inches to peek over the top. The two students by the window put their phones down. There was a feeling of skepticism in the air. Everyone expected him to start banging on the keys. They expected a terrible loud noise that would make them laugh or cover their ears. They thought this was just a joke or that the man was crazy. The manager, Ron, was standing near the kitchen door with his arms crossed. He shook his head at Maya, his face saying, "This is a waste of time." But Maya just ignored him. She wiped her hands on her apron and waited. She had a feeling in her gut that something special was about to happen. She didn't know why, but she trusted him. The man took a deep breath. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if he was listening to a song inside his head that no one else could hear. Then he placed his fingers on the keys. He didn't press them down hard at first. He just touched them, getting to know the feel of the ivory and plastic under his skin. For a few seconds, silence hung heavy in the room. Then his right hand moved. The first note was clear and crisp. It rang out like a bell cutting through the fog of the diner. Then came a second note, and a third. He wasn't banging. He was caressing the keys. The sound that came out wasn't a clumsy child's tune. It was a melody. A complex, beautiful, flowing river of sound. The people in the diner froze. The skepticism vanished instantly. The man's left hand joined in, adding a deep, steady rhythm. The music wasn't just background noise anymore. It was alive. It filled every corner of the room. It was a piece of classical music, something intense and emotional, full of sadness but also full of hope. The notes tumbled over each other, fast and precise, yet incredibly gentle. Maya stopped wiping the counter. She felt goosebumps rise on her arms. She looked at the man's hands. They didn't look like the hands of a homeless person anymore. They moved with a grace and speed that seemed impossible for someone living on the streets. He wasn't looking at his hands. He was looking straight ahead, lost in the music. The students by the window were now staring, their mouths slightly open. The man with the newspaper had completely forgotten his coffee. He turned his chair around to face the piano, a look of pure amazement on his face. Even the cooks in the kitchen poked their heads through the serving window, wiping their hands on their shirts, drawn by the sound. It wasn't just that he could play. It was the emotion he put into it. You could hear the pain in his life in the lower notes, deep and dark. You could hear his memories in the high notes, light and fleeting. It sounded like a story of a man who had lost everything but still remembered what beauty felt like. The song went on for several minutes. No one spoke. No one ate. The only sound in the diner was the rain still beating against the glass, which now seemed to blend perfectly with the rhythm of the piano. The man swayed slightly back and forth, his dirty coat moving with him. He was somewhere else entirely. For these few minutes, he wasn't a homeless man in a wet coat. He was a master. He was an artist. When he hit the final chord, he held it, letting the sound fade away slowly into the air. He lifted his hands off the keys and let them drop to his lap. He kept his head bowed for a moment, catching his breath. There was a silence that lasted for 3 seconds. A heavy, awestruck silence. Then the entire diner erupted. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was a loud, enthusiastic cheer. The man with the newspaper clapped the hardest. The students were whistling. Even a few of the grumpy customers at the counter were smiling and nodding their heads. The man looked up, startled by the noise. He seemed to suddenly remember where he was. He looked around the room, his eyes wide, as if he was surprised to see all these people there. He looked down at his hands and then quickly pulled his sleeves down to hide them, looking embarrassed. He wasn't used to praise. He was used to people looking away. Maya walked over to him, clapping her hands. Her smile was so big it made her face hurt. She was right. She knew it. "That was beautiful," she said, her voice full of sincerity. "Absolutely beautiful." "What is that song called?" The man looked at her, his eyes shining a little. It's called The Rain," he whispered. "An old piece. I haven't played it in I don't know how long." "You play like a professional," Maya said. "I mean it. You have a gift." The man shook his head, looking down. "Not anymore. I'm just tired now. You must be hungry," Maya said gently. "I made a deal, and I keep my promises." She walked back behind the counter. The diner was buzzing with excitement now. People were whispering to each other, wondering who this man was. The atmosphere had completely changed. The cold, gloomy feeling was gone, replaced by a warm curiosity. Maya went to the kitchen window. "Hey, Carl," she said to the cook. "Can you make that double cheeseburger with extra fries? And a bowl of the hot vegetable soup. Make it a big bowl." Carl, a big man with a mustache, nodded. He had heard the music, too. "You got it, Maya. Put it on the rush." While she waited for the food, Maya poured a large cup of black coffee. She grabbed some sugar and cream on the side, not knowing how he liked it. She also grabbed a few napkins. Then she walked back over to the piano. The man was still sitting on the bench, staring at the keys. He looked exhausted, like the music had taken all the energy he had left. "Here," Maya said, placing the coffee down on top of the piano. "Hot and fresh. This will warm you up." He looked at the coffee as if it was gold. "Thank you," he said. He picked it up with both hands and took a sip. He closed his eyes as the hot liquid went down. "Thank you so much. Your food will be right up," Maya said. She leaned against the piano, looking at him. "You really surprised everyone." "I don't think they were expecting that kind of concert today." Small, shy smile crossed his face. "I just wanted the burger," he joked quietly. Maya laughed. "Well, you're going to get the best burger in the city." She sat down in the chair next to him for a moment. "You know," she said softly, "you shouldn't hide that talent. It's too good to be locked away." The man's smile faded a little. He looked sad again. "Talent doesn't keep you warm at night," he muttered. "And it doesn't bring people back." He stopped talking, realizing he had said too much. Maya didn't push him. She knew everyone had secrets. Everyone had a past that they were running from. She just patted his shoulder gently. "Well, tonight it bought you a hot meal. And it made a lot of people happy. That counts for something." Just then, the bell dinged in the kitchen. "Order up," Carl shouted. "Be right back," Maya said. She went to the pass and picked up the heavy plate. The burger was huge, loaded with cheese and onions. The fries were golden and steaming hot. The bowl of soup smelled like carrots and celery and comfort. It was a meal fit for a king, or at least for a very hungry man. She carried the tray back to the table. The smell of the food made her own stomach rumble, but she ignored it. She placed the tray down in front of the man who had moved from the piano back to the small table. "Eat up," she said. "Take your time." The man looked at the food. He looked like he couldn't believe his eyes. He picked up a fry and ate it slowly, savoring the taste. Then he took a bite of the burger. A tear rolled down his cheek, mixing with the rainwater on his face. He wiped it away quickly, hoping Maya didn't see. Maya saw, but she pretended not to. She walked back to the counter to give him some privacy. She could hear him eating. It wasn't the messy, desperate eating of a starving animal. It was the slow, grateful eating of someone who hadn't felt peace in a long time. She looked over at Ron. The manager was watching the man eat, his arms still crossed, but he wasn't frowning anymore. He looked confused. He shook his head and walked back into his office without a word. Even he couldn't deny that the man had a gift. Maya felt good. It wasn't just the free food she had given away well. Technically, it was coming out of her tips, so it was her money. But it was worth it. For a few minutes, the diner had been transformed. And this man, this stranger from the street, had shown them all that you can't judge a book by its cover. She refilled a customer's water glass, humming the tune of the rain quietly to herself, wondering who he really was and where he came from. But for now, he was just a man enjoying a hot meal, and that was enough. However, the man's music had traveled further than just the customers in the room. Near the back of the diner, in a booth that was partially hidden in the shadows, a woman sat alone. She was dressed in expensive clothes, wearing a trench coat and a silk scarf. She had been typing on a laptop when the music started. The moment the first note played, she had stopped. She hadn't clapped like the others. She hadn't cheered. She had just sat there, frozen, staring at the back of the piano player. She knew that song. She knew the way he played the trill, the specific way he hesitated on the third beat. She knew those hands, even from a distance. A look of shock was on her face. She slowly closed her laptop, her hands shaking slightly. She reached for her glass of water and took a sip to compose herself, but her eyes never left the man eating the burger. "It can't be," she whispered to herself. "He's gone." Everyone said he was gone. She took a deep breath and stood up. She adjusted her coat, straightened her scarf, and walked toward Maya at the counter. She had a determined look on her face. The story wasn't over. In fact, it was about to get much more complicated. The diner was still buzzing with the quiet amazement of the music, but the focus was shifting back to food and coffee. Maya was busy refilling sugar dispensers when she noticed the woman in the corner booth stand up. She had been sitting there typing on a laptop when the music started, but the moment the first note played, she had stopped completely. Now she was walking toward the counter with a strange look on her face, half confusion, half recognition. The woman was older, perhaps in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a long, expensive wool coat and carried a leather bag that looked like it cost more than Maya made in a month. She walked with a sense of purpose, moving gracefully through the tables until she reached the counter where Maya was standing. "Excuse me, miss," the woman said. Her voice was crisp and educated, the kind of voice that belonged on a radio broadcast or in a university lecture hall. "Hi there," Maya said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Can I get you a refill?" "Or the check." "I don't want coffee," the woman said. Her eyes fixed on the back of the room where the homeless man was still eating his meal. "I want to know about that man." "The one at the piano." Maya glanced over her shoulder. The man was taking small bites of his burger, savoring every crumb, seemingly unaware that anyone was talking about him. "Oh, him. He just came in out of the rain. I don't know his name. He was freezing, so I made a deal with him." "A song for a meal? A deal?" The woman raised an eyebrow. "You didn't know who he was when you asked him to play?" "No," Maya said honestly. "I just had a hunch. He looked like he needed a break, and we have that old piano sitting there, gathering dust." "Why do you know him?" The woman didn't answer immediately. She turned and looked at the man again, her expression softening into something that looked like deep sadness mixed with wonder. "I thought I did," she whispered, "but he looks so different now. The years on the street, they change a person. But the hands. I would know those hands anywhere." Maya leaned in closer, intrigued. "Who is he?" The woman turned back to Maya. "My name is Eleanor Vance," she said. "I am a music critic for the city's major newspaper, and I used to teach at the Conservatory of Music downtown. That man, if it is who I think it is. He isn't just a street musician. He is a ghost." "A ghost?" Maya asked, confused. "A musical ghost," Eleanor explained. "About 5 years ago, the city's most promising young pianist vanished. His name was Dr. Samuel Thorne. He was a genius. He could play things that other players only dreamed of. He was famous all over the world. But then, his wife passed away very suddenly. It broke him. He just disappeared. One day he was there, and the next day his house was empty. No one knew where he went. People searched for him, but he was gone." "Okay." Maya looked over at the man in the torn coat, shivering as he ate his soup. It seemed impossible. That quiet, shy man was a famous doctor, a world-class musician. Samuel Thorne. Maya repeated softly. I need to be sure, Eleanor said. I need to hear him play again. Something specific. He might not play again, Maya said. He looks pretty tired. Please, Eleanor said. And for the first time, the stern, professional look on her face cracked, showing a desperate kindness underneath. If I am right, the world needs to know he is okay. More importantly, he needs help. He shouldn't be eating alone in a diner when he belongs in a concert hall. Please, ask him. Tell him. Tell him an old friend is asking. Maya looked at Eleanor's pleading eyes. It wasn't every day a music critic walked into the diner. She decided to take a chance. Okay, I'll try. But you have to promise to be gentle. He's been through a lot, I promise, Eleanor said. Maya walked slowly toward the man's table. He had finished the soup and was working on the fries. He looked up as Maya approached, and for a second, he looked guilty, as if he thought she was going to ask him to leave now that the song was done. Is everything tasting okay? Maya asked him. It's the best meal I've had in years, he said sincerely. Thank you. You didn't have to do this. It was worth it just to hear you play, Maya said with a smile. Actually, that brings up a funny thing. There is a lady over there by the counter. She thinks she knows you. The man froze. His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He looked past Maya, his eyes locking onto Eleanor Vance standing by the register. The color drained from his face. Her, he croaked. Eleanor is here? Yes, Maya said gently. She says she used to know a pianist named Samuel Thorne. She says, you look like him. The man dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the plate. He looked down at the table, his breathing getting fast and shallow. He looked like a trapped animal. He grabbed his backpack, ready to run. No, he whispered. I can't. Not her. Hey, it's okay, Maya said, reaching out a hand but not touching him. She's not going to hurt you. She just wants to talk. She was worried about you. Not him, the man said, his voice shaking, though his eyes betrayed the lie. I'm nobody. Just a bum. I need to go. Can't go back out in that storm, Maya said firmly. Just hear her out. If you want to leave after that, I won't stop you. But look at her. She's not asking for an autograph. She looks sad. The man hesitated. He looked at the door, where the rain was still hammering against the glass, and then he looked at Eleanor. He saw the old woman standing there, waiting patiently. He took a deep breath and let his shoulders drop. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, but tell her no photos. No interviews. I just want to eat my meal. Fair enough, Maya said. She walked back to Eleanor. He'll talk to you. But go easy on him, Eleanor nodded. She took a deep breath, smoothing her coat, and walked over to the small table. She didn't approach him like a stranger. She pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down slowly. Hello, Samuel, she said softly. The man didn't look up. He poked at a remaining French fry. Hello, Eleanor. It's been a long time, she said. We looked for you, you know. For a long time. I didn't want to be found, he said, his voice raspy. I still don't. I'm just existing now. The music died when Mary did. Music didn't die, Samuel, Eleanor said. I just heard it. It was right here in this diner. It was beautiful. It was sad. Yes, but it was beautiful. You still have it. Doesn't matter, he said, finally looking up. His eyes were filled with tears. Look at me, Eleanor. Look at what I've become. I'm not Dr. Thorne anymore. I'm just a mess. I play on street corners sometimes for coins, but mostly I just try to survive. I have nothing left to give. Eleanor reached into her purse. She pulled out a handkerchief and handed it to him. He took it tentatively. You have more to give than you think. You gave this restaurant a gift today. You gave that waitress a moment of magic. You think you are invisible, but you aren't. You never were. I'm tired, he said, wiping his eyes. I'm just so tired. I know, Eleanor said. She paused for a moment, choosing her words carefully. I didn't come to drag you back to some fancy life you don't want. I came because I heard you play, and I knew you were still in there. and I want to help you get off the street. Not for the music. For you. You don't deserve to be cold and hungry. No one does." The man looked at her surprised. The usual offer was come back and play. No one ever offered to help him? Why? He asked. "Why help me?" "I ran away. I left everything." "Because you were my best student," Eleanor said simply. "And because Mary would have hated to see you like this?" The mention of his wife's name hit him hard. He stared at Eleanor for a long time, his defenses crumbling down. He looked at his half-eaten burger, then at his dirty hands. He looked at Maya, who was pretending to clean a table nearby, but was actually listening with tears in her eyes. "Okay," the man whispered. "Okay? I don't know what you can do, but okay?" Eleanor smiled. It was a warm, relieved smile. "We can start with a hot meal," she said, nodding at his plate. "And then we can figure out the rest." The diner was quiet again, but not with the heavy silence of before. It was a respectful silence. The other customers had no idea that a reunion of sorts was happening in the corner booth. They just saw an old lady and a homeless man talking. But for Maya, watching from the counter, it felt like witnessing a miracle. The piano sat empty in the corner, waiting. But the song wasn't over yet. The man who everyone thought was just a stranger was finally coming home, one small step at a time. The rain continued to beat against the glass, creating a soft, rhythmic background to the conversation in the corner booth. Maya stood near the coffee machine, pretending to organize cups. But her ears were tuned completely to the table where Eleanor and Samuel were sitting. It felt like she was watching a movie unfold in real life. Right there in the middle of the lunch rush, Eleanor reached across the table and placed her hand gently over Samuel's. His hand was still dirty. His knuckles swollen from the cold, but he didn't pull away. The connection seemed to ground him. "Samuel," Eleanor said, her voice low and firm, like a mother speaking to a frightened child. "You can't go back out there tonight. Look at your coat. Look at your shoes. You can't survive another winter on these streets." Samuel looked down at his clothes as if seeing them for the first time. He pulled his hand back slowly and rubbed his face. "I don't have anywhere else to go, Eleanor. The shelter is full by this time of day. Usually, I find a spot under the bridge, or in an alley if it's not too windy. It's not so bad. You get used to the cold after a while." "No one gets used to that kind of cold," Eleanor said sharply. "You only get used to dying slowly." She turned and signaled to Maya. "Miss, could we have some more coffee, please? And perhaps a slice of that apple pie for my friend here?" Maya nodded quickly. "Coming right up." She sliced the pie. Maya's mind was racing. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She wanted to help, but she didn't want to intrude. She carried the pie and a fresh pot of coffee over to the table. As she set the plate down in front of Samuel, the smell of cinnamon and sugar filled the air. Samuel looked at the pie, his eyes wide. He picked up the fork, his hand shaking slightly. "I haven't had apple pie since the last Christmas with Mary," he whispered. "Then it's time you had some more," Eleanor said. She looked up at Maya. "Thank you for your kindness to him. You have no idea what you've done today." Maya smiled. "He did all the work. He played the music. I just gave him a stage." Eleanor turned her attention back to Samuel. "I have a guest room, Samuel. It's small, but it's warm. There's a lock on the door. No strings attached. You can stay for a few nights, just until we figure out a plan." "I don't want to be a burden," Samuel said, though the hunger in his eyes betrayed him. He took a bite of the pie and closed his eyes, savoring the sweetness. "You are not a burden," Eleanor insisted. "You are my friend. And frankly, the music world owes you a debt." "We all thought you were gone for good." Samuel put his fork down. He looked around the diner, his gaze landing on the piano in the corner. A shadow passed over his face. "The music is gone, Eleanor. What I played today, that was just an echo. I haven't played a real concert in 5 years. My fingers, they don't listen to my brain like they used to." "Muscle memory never forgets," Eleanor said wisely. "I heard the trills, Samuel. I heard the dynamic control. Do not lie to a music critic. You still have the fire. It's just buried under a lot of pain." The manager, Ron, came out of the office again. He checked his watch and looked at the door, clearly hoping the rain would stop and the customers would leave so he could close early. He stared at the booth where the elegant woman was sitting with the homeless man, shaking his head. He didn't say anything, but his body language screamed disapproval. Maya walked over to him. "Leave them be, Ron. They aren't hurting anyone. They're taking up a table during the dinner prep," Ron grumbled. "And he's going to scare away the evening crowd." Maya pointed to Eleanor. "She is a big deal. She writes for the paper. If you kick them out, she might write a review about how this place treats people." "I don't think you want that." Ron paused, his eyes narrowing. He looked at Eleanor's expensive coat, and then at Samuel. He did the math. Bad publicity was worse than a homeless man eating pie. "Fine," he muttered. "But make sure they don't stay all night." Maya went back behind the counter, feeling a small victory. She watched as Samuel finished his pie. He looked different now. He sat up a little straighter. The food had put color in his cheeks, and the coffee had warmed him up. The wild, frightened look in his eyes was fading, replaced by a look of deep exhaustion and relief. Eleanor took a checkbook out of her bag. "Maya," she called out. "How much for the meal?" "Including the pie and the coffee." "Please, I have money," Samuel said. Reaching into his pocket for his crumpled bills again, Eleanor put her hand over his, stopping him. "Stop it," she said gently. "I am buying. You can pay me back by playing for me tomorrow." "Just one song." Samuel sighed and let his hand drop. He was too tired to argue. Maya walked over with the bill. Eleanor didn't even look at the price. She pulled out a pen and wrote a check for an amount much larger than the bill. She slipped it into the folder. "Keep the change," Eleanor said to Maya. For the kindness, Maya glanced at the check as she picked it up. Her eyes nearly popped out of her head. The tip was $500. Maya looked up, stunned, to thank her, but Eleanor was already helping Samuel out of the booth. "Come," Eleanor said. "My car is outside. Let's get you warm." Samuel stood up slowly. He grabbed his backpack and his old wet coat. He looked at the piano one last time. He hesitated, then walked over to it. He placed his hand on the wood, almost like saying goodbye to an old friend. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the instrument. "We'll get you a piano," Eleanor said from behind him. "I have a baby grand at the house. It needs tuning, but it works." Samuel turned to look at her. "I don't know if I can play on a schedule again, Eleanor. I can't be the person everyone expects me to be." "And don't be," she said simply. "Just be Samuel. Play for yourself. Play because it makes you feel less empty." He nodded slowly. He adjusted his backpack and walked toward the door. Maya hurried around the counter to open it for them. She wanted to say goodbye, to wish him luck, but she felt like she was intruding on a private moment. As they reached the door, Samuel stopped. He turned to Maya. His eyes were clear and serious. "Thank you," he said. His voice wasn't shaky anymore. "You didn't see a bum today. You saw a person. That's a rare thing." Maya felt a lump in her throat. "You're welcome," she said softly. "Take care of yourself, Samuel." "I will try," he said. Eleanor nodded to Maya. "Thank you again." And then they were gone. The bell chimed, and the cold air rushed in for a second before the door swung shut. Sealing the warmth back inside, the diner felt different now. The piano stood empty in the corner, looking larger than before. The man with the newspaper had left. The students were gone. The diner was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Maya stood by the door, looking out through the rain streaked glass. She watched as an elegant black car pulled up to the curb. Eleanor opened the back door, and Samuel got in. It was strange to see his dirty boots and torn coat disappearing into the pristine interior of such a nice car. But it also felt right. It felt like a missing piece of a puzzle had finally been found. She stood there for a long time, even after the car drove away and disappeared into the traffic. She thought about how easily she could have ignored him. How easily she could have let Ron kick him out. If she hadn't taken that small chance, if she hadn't asked him to play, he would still be out there in the rain, invisible and alone. Instead, he was on his way to a warm bed and a second chance at life. Maya looked down at the check in her hand. $500. It would cover her rent. It would give her a little breathing room. But somehow, the money didn't feel as important as the music she had heard. She walked back over to the counter and sat down on a stool, taking a deep breath. "You okay?" Ron asked, coming out of the office. He looked grumpy, but slightly curious. "Yeah," Maya said, folding the check and putting it in her pocket. "I'm good. Just thinking." "Well, don't think too hard. Those tables aren't going to bust themselves," Ron said, walking back into the kitchen. Maya smiled and stood up. She grabbed a cloth and walked over to the corner booth where Samuel had sat. There was a crumb of apple pie on the table. She wiped it away, then walked over to the piano. She ran her finger along the dusty keys. He had touched these keys. He had poured his soul into this old beat-up instrument. She knew she would never forget this day, and she had a feeling that this wasn't the last time she would hear the name Samuel Thorne. The music hadn't died. It had just been waiting for the rain to stop. 6 months passed, and the city moved through its usual rhythm of seasons. The cold rain of that Tuesday was long gone, replaced by the warm golden glow of autumn. The daily grind looked much the same booths, the same smell of bacon, and the same bell above the door. But for Maya, the place felt different. She often found herself looking at the corner where the old piano sat, thinking about the man who had walked out of her life and into a car with Eleanor. Maya's life had improved, little by little. The tip Eleanor had left helped her get out of debt and even take a few days off to visit her family. But she always wondered what happened to Samuel. Did he stay with Eleanor? Did he go back to the streets? She read the newspaper occasionally, looking for his name, but she never saw it. Then, one sunny afternoon, a flyer was slipped under the front door of the diner. It was a simple piece of cream-colored paper with elegant black lettering. Ron picked it up from the floor and squinted at it. Benefit concert. Homeless shelter fundraiser. Ron read aloud. He shrugged and was about to throw it in the trash, but something made him look closer at the bottom. Special guest performance, Dr. Samuel Thorne.
Oh, Ron froze.
He looked at the name, then at the piano in the corner. His mouth opened slightly. "Maya," he shouted, his voice cracking with surprise. "Maya, get out here." Maya ran from the kitchen, thinking something was wrong. "What is it? Is the kitchen on fire?" "No," Ron said, holding up the flyer. "Look, it's him, the piano guy. He's playing at the big theater downtown. Tonight." Maya grabbed the paper. Her hands trembled as she read the words. Samuel Thorne, a benefit concert. It was real. He had done it. He had come back. "I have to go," Maya said immediately. "Can't just leave," Ron stammered. "We have the dinner rush." "Ron, please," Maya begged. "I helped him. I have to see this. Just for 2 hours. I'll come back and close up, I promise. I'll even scrub the floors." Ron looked at Maya, then at the flyer. He remembered the music that had silenced his diner that rainy day. He remembered the look on the man's face when he ate the pie. Ron sighed, the angry manager mask slipping away just a little bit. "Go on," he said, waving his hand. "But you better be back by 10, and don't tell anyone I let you go." "I won't. Thank you." Maya grabbed her coat and ran out the door before he could change his mind. That evening, the city theater was packed. People in suits and expensive dresses filled the velvet seats. It was a fancy crowd, there to support the homeless shelter and hear good music. Maya stood at the back of the hall, feeling a little out of place in her waitress uniform and a simple cardigan she kept at work. But she didn't care. She was there. The lights dimmed. The chatter of the crowd faded into silence. Eleanor Vance walked onto the stage. She looked elegant in a dark blue dress. She walked to the microphone and spoke to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Thank you for coming tonight. Our story tonight is about second chances. It is about how we should never look past a person just because they have fallen on hard times. We have a very special guest. A man who lost everything but found his way back through kindness and music. Please welcome my friend, Dr. Samuel Thorne." The applause was polite at first, but then it grew louder as a man walked onto the stage. Maya held her breath. Samuel looked completely different. His hair was cut and neatly styled. His beard was trimmed. He was wearing a clean black tuxedo that fit him perfectly. He looked healthy, well-fed, and strong. But his eyes were the same kind, deep and a little bit shy. He walked to the grand piano in the center of the stage. He sat down on the bench. He adjusted the microphone. He looked out at the huge crowd. Then he looked toward the back of the room as if he was searching for someone. Maya shrank back behind a pillar, feeling shy. She didn't want him to see her and get distracted. Samuel put his hands on the keys. He paused for a moment. Then he began to play. The music that filled the theater was not the same sad song he had played in the diner. This was powerful, triumphant, and full of life. It was a complex symphony played on just one piano. The notes cascaded like a waterfall, crashing over the audience. It was the sound of a man who had been through hell and came back to tell the story. The audience was mesmerized. No one coughed. No one whispered. They just watched him. Maya watched, 2 tears streaming down her face. She remembered his dirty, trembling hands in the diner and compared them to the confident, masterful hands flying over the keys now. The music was breathtaking. It was full of joy, but also a deep sadness that he had turned into something beautiful. The performance lasted for 45 minutes. When he played the final chord, the silence stretched out for a second before the entire theater exploded. It wasn't just applause. It was a roar. People stood to their feet. They clapped until their hands hurt. They shouted bravo. Samuel stood up and bowed. He looked overwhelmed, but happy. He looked over at Eleanor and smiled, and she clapped for him too. Then he held up his hand to quiet the crowd. The applause died down. "Thank you," Samuel said into the microphone. His voice was strong. "I am standing here today because of 2 people. One is my dear friend Eleanor, who gave me a roof over my head when I had nothing." The audience clapped for Eleanor. But Samuel continued, "I would not be here if not for a young woman who saw me on my worst day. I was wet, cold, and hungry. I had nothing to offer but dirt and rags. But she didn't see a bum. She saw a human being. She traded a meal for a song at a small diner called the Daily Grind." Maya gasped. Her face turned red. People started looking around the theater, wondering who that person was. "If she is here tonight," Samuel said, looking directly toward the back of the room, toward the pillar where Maya was hiding, "I would like her to come up here." Maya shook her head. No way, she couldn't go up there. But then a spotlight hit the back of the room. It found her. People started nudging her. "Go," someone whispered. "It's you." Maya's legs felt like jelly. She walked slowly down the aisle. The spotlight followed her. She could see Samuel at the stage, smiling at her, nodding for her to come. She walked up the steps, her heart pounding harder than it ever had in her life. When she reached him, he pulled her into a hug. It was a warm, genuine hug. The audience went awe and clapped even louder. "This is Maya," Samuel said to the crowd. "She taught me that a single act of kindness can save a life." "Thank you, Maya." Maya didn't know what to say. She just whispered, "You're welcome," into the microphone. She was crying happy tears. They stood there for a moment, the waitress in the cardigan and the famous pianist in the tuxedo. It was a picture of 2 worlds colliding. Later that night, after the concert was over, the crowd had gone home. Maya was helping Samuel and Eleanor pack up some sheet music backstage. Samuel was tired but glowing with happiness. "Thank you for making me go up there," Maya said, laughing. "I thought I was going to faint." "You deserved it," Samuel said. "I came back to the diner a few weeks ago, you know." "You did?" "I didn't see you." "I stood outside the window," Samuel said. "I wanted to see if you were there. I didn't go in. I wasn't ready. But watching you work so hard, it gave me the courage to play tonight. I knew if I could play for you, I could play for anyone." Maya smiled. "Well, I'm glad you're back. And I'm glad you're not sleeping under that bridge anymore." "Me too," Samuel said. "Me too." A few weeks after the concert, a surprising thing happened. Samuel donated a beautiful, brand new baby grand piano to the Daily Grind. It was polished and shiny, sitting in the corner where the old dusty one used to be. Ron was so excited about the publicity the diner received from the story that he didn't complain about the space it took up every Tuesday afternoon. If you walked past the diner, you might hear the sound of classical music drifting out onto the street. Samuel would come in, not as a homeless man, but as a friend. He would sit at the new piano and play. He played for Maya, for Ron, and for the customers. And sometimes he played just for himself. Remembering the rainy day when a kind waitress let him play for a meal, and how that one small moment gave him back his life. It wasn't a fairy tale. Samuel still missed his wife. Maya still had bills to pay. But the world felt a little warmer, a little kinder. And it all started with a plate of fries, a cup of coffee, and a song.